Hey, it's Soul with a 9.2 PTR video that's going to try to give you an idea of what is the best gear to have for outdoor content in Zereth Mortis. Yeah, that's kind of weird, best in slots for outdoor content. So obviously this video has a target audience that might not be you. And here's the premise. 9.2 is giving players who don't focus on raids or PvP or dungeons in an organized fashion to give these folks new opportunities to feel powerful in their element, the outdoor world. You remember a few years ago, there was Titan forging, and later there was corruption, and one could feasibly have like a bunch of Twilight devastations and infinite stars flying around, laying waste to the rabble. Luck might not have been the most engaging sort of way to progress and create that power fantasy of yours, but it was better than nothing. Unfortunately, with the start of Shadowlands, those players didn't have those fun random toys. Beyond the conduits and the powers and the legendaries, they had the Covenant sets, which compared to the other ways to enjoy WoW, it was pretty lackluster. In patch 9.1, they got upgradable Korthia gear, which was a step in the right direction with a higher item level cap, but it was marred by the gear not being all that interesting, and it was very slow to upgrade thanks to renowned requirements. With patch 9.2, I'm not going to be able to reassure you that this next go at outdoor progression is going to feel better, but it'll certainly feel different. This information is based on the PTR. It's both incomplete and it's up for change. For example, I'm not sure what trinkets are available in the zone, so react at your own risk. There are several pillars that comprise your best gear in Zereth Mortis and other outdoor content. Weapons and trinkets seem to be kind of a random drop with little to no rhyme nor reason, so you're not going to hear me talking about these today. I just hope that they drop. Now there's crafted gear with special augments. There's Cypher Gear found in the zone. There's tier sets, which can be, I guess, transmuted from other gear found in 9.2. And finally, there's the double legendary perk, and we'll start off with that. According to the latest information, a new legendary will be available from the Enlighten Reputation vendor. Buying it will require Cosmic Flux, which is found throughout the zone and elsewhere, and getting to Revered Reputation, which requires basically doing Zereth Mortis things. The legendary behaves just like the 9.1 legendaries that enhance your covenant ability, only this will change when you switch covenants. On the vendor it appears as a belt, but you can also buy a memory of this legendary and make it on whatever slot you like. So regardless of your class, spec, or armor type, consider the legendary as a wild card. It can go anywhere except for the trinket slot, of course, so when you're planning on how to set up your character, the placement of this new legendary can probably be considered last. Not so easy is where your first legendary will go. The solution is going to be different for everyone, depending on class, spec, and playstyle, but here are a few thoughts. The safest slots to make your other legendary will be the wrist, the jewelry, and the cloak slots. The jewelry slots take some secondary stats away, but at least with rings you have 2 slots anyway. You all know how to at least craft a legendary by now. The updates in 9.2 are going to feel just the same as 9.1, so we can move on to tier gear. At the moment, we don't know exactly how to get this gear. We know that we'll be able to take gear that we find during Season 3 and convert it into tier using Cosmic Flux and a Creation Catalyst. So for example, if I'm in the zone and a high level chest piece happens to drop, if I have the currency, I can change it into a tier piece of the same item level. We don't know if this is going to work for gear earned from world quests in old Shadowlands zones or from previous season content like Korthia gear. I'm going to assume no. According to a post from Wowhead, bind on equip gear from the raid inhabit slots where tier gear could go. That means a market's going to open up for this gear specifically for the purpose of making high item level tier pieces. How expensive these pieces go for is anyone's guess, because it's going to be based on when the creation catalyst becomes available. Regardless of when though, personally I don't think this is too big of a concern unless you're a whale who has no problem spending gold on stuff like this. Looking past how to obtain them though, we know tier sets will have a 2 and a 4-piece bonus as usual, and will have 5 pieces total, giving us a tiny bit of wiggle room. Tier pieces take up the head, the shoulder, the chest, the glove, and the leg slots. It's up to you which slot you want to sacrifice for something else. So for example, maybe you want your legendary to give the most stats in a single slot, so one legendary will take up the head, the chest, or the leg slot. But you might want to swap out gear from one situation to the next, or across specializations. I imagine that's not an uncommon thing, even if higher endgame isn't your calling. Whatever the case though, I speculate that tier set bonuses are what you'll complete last, unless you happen to dabble in some group content like the Raid Finder or the Time Walking and Dungeon events that award raid gear. Now let's take a look at Cypher Gear, found in Zereth Mortis. A weekly quest in the zone awards a box of goodies, and I happen to get a piece of Cypher Gear here, so there's that, but I'm not certain of other sources of this gear. In a nutshell, Cypher Gear is almost directly linked to your progression in Zereth Mortis. Select pieces of gear include perks that get stronger the further you go in the Cypher of the first ones, which is a separate progression system. I actually get into this in a separate video, but what I'd like to focus on here is the piece that you are most likely to use, a single piece of gear per armor type that lets you socket some special powers. Cloth wearers will find this piece of gear on the chest slot, leather and plate wearers will find this on the helmet, male users will find this socket on the shoulders. So what can you socket into this gear? There's a console you interact with in the zone that produces random buffs that can be temporary, or they can be inserted into this gear to gain the effect permanently. Some powers are way better than others, and I'm here to point out the good ones because there's like 20 of them. The 40-Alic buff gives you a cheat death perk every 10 minutes. The Officialic buff gives a chance for abilities to have no cooldown. As a side note, I've yet to see this work with abilities like Ashen Hollow, but I refuse to give up. The Toxicialic buff, if I'm pronouncing that right, is arguably my favorite. It deals max health damage to mobs around you every 5 seconds. The Robustialic buff acts like a sort of passive PvP trinket, which can be useful in outdoor PvP. The Extractialic buff also sounds kind of silly, but it gives a gold bonus to mob kills and to quests. The Velocialic buff gives extra run and mounted speed, and the tooltip does not say that it doesn't stack with other effects. There are many other buffs, and even if you throw them into a socket, using them will give the buff for 1 hour and you can stack up to 5 of them. That said, there is a process to obtaining Cypher Gear and completing the research needed to attach these buffs to your gear as well as powering them up. And of course, there's getting the gear itself. Also consider your armor type and how this might conflict with your tier set gear. With some regular play, you'll likely have the agency to play with these within like the first few weeks. In the meantime though, there's crafted gear. Like in 9.1, a new crafter's mark will allow folks to make 233 blue gear as soon as they reach Honored with the Enlightened faction. So far at the start of 9.2, you start at neutral. It's hard to tell how long it'll take to rep up properly because we don't know if all the side quests and world quests have been enabled, daily quests currently don't give base reputation, and so on and so forth. But my guess is that access to the Mark IV recipe will take about as long as the Mark III recipe did in patch 9.1, so yeah, just a few weeks. In the meantime though, crafters will also be hunting for recipes to craft progenitor enhancements, which offer some really cool buffs, some of which are probably broken and will be nerfed before this goes live, but hey, nothing wrong with telling you about them as they are right now. Progenitor enhancements are pretty simple in their application. They're craftable reagents like missives that you attach to blue crafting recipes. Pop it in, and now you have a perk that works anywhere. Making them will require some new reagents found only in 9.2 content, meaning that there's only so much advanced preparation you can do. For now though, onto the reagents and what they do. I tested these out by crafting as many as I could as a blacksmith and stacked the same buffs where I could. And I have a really good feeling that this isn't entirely intended. Now let's take a look. The magically regulated Automa Core periodically spawns a single bomb that detonates after a few seconds, dealing damage in an approximately 3-yard AoE. It's modest damage at 300 or so, but it happens to stack up to 3600 damage if you stack this augment among all your crafted gear. Side note, don't do that. The proc rate is a bit low at what feels like 2 per minute, so even then it's not a big deal. The Cosmic Proto-Weave gives avoidance and a really sad healing proc when taking damage, even if you're stacked. But if you do stack this, you have a bit over 25% avoidance, which, hey, that's kind of cool, that's less AoE. Okay, it's not that cool. Corpse Putrefaction does not seem to work. It's supposed to give extra stuff from corpses, and the tooltip suggests that there's supposed to be a visual effect. Unfortunately though, there's nothing, so that's all I gotta say. The Aalic Harmonizing Stone poops out a shiny yellow thing while you fight. Touch it and you get a decent main stat buff for a few seconds. It's not really my favorite though. The Pure Air Sail extensions increase movement and mount speed. The speed stat does stack. The mount speed though does not, so that makes this kind of meh, not so great. The erratic Genesis matrix gives a stacking buff when hit, and when you hit 5 stacks, it deals damage to the next target that hit you. There's no cooldown on the stack building, so for a tank, this can easily be like your top 3 or so damage dealing abilities just by standing around and not dying. The Devour Essence Stone is massively broken in my opinion. It says it gives you a bonus to your highest secondary stat for about 15 or so seconds, and it stacks up to 10 times. At the moment, it only increases your versatility and stacks up to 5 times. However, you can stack this with multiple pieces of the same augment. So I can theoretically be running around stupid with 70 or so % versatility, which is hilarious. I say enjoy this while you can on the PTR because there's almost no chance it's going to go live like this. And finally, the Sustaining Armor Polish increases the duration of consumable buffs, and it stacks if you want hours-long flasks or food buffs. Crafted gear is about more than just the funny perks though. Another new crafter's mark is also coming that will let you wear one piece of gear with an item level of 262. Like in 9.1, I recommend saving this for the neck or the ring slot, depending on if you have a legendary that's taking up space there. This will give you the best secondary stat bang for your buck. It also means that even if you won't be able to stack these progenitor buffs, you'll probably have a 262 as one of your best pieces of gear. It depends on your preference, but the kill streak buff is arguably the best one of the buffs, even if it's likely to get nerfed. Since most of your time is going to be spent outdoors, the corpse putrefaction piece is also a good pick for long-term farming. We're just gonna have to wait and see when this thing works. And extending your buffs isn't a bad pick either. What's cool here is that crafted gear, despite the low item level, provides tons of utility because you can mix and match and stack many of these buffs, making this an option to fill holes in your gearing. Now let's put this all together and finally get to your path to gearing up in patch 9.2. To do this, we'll pull up this paper doll and we'll start filling it up with stuff. Since Cypher Gear take up different slots depending on your armor type, we'll begin with the plate and leather wearers, since they both use the helmet slot for Cypher Gear, and we'll consider that a lock. As for what power you want to slot into it, that's entirely up to you, but personally, I'll be going for that toxic perk. With the helmet slot taken up, your 4-piece bonus is pretty much already decided for you, making the shoulders, chest, legs, and hands another lock. This leaves a few more slots, and now we have to consider crafted gear and the 2 legendaries. One of the crafted pieces is going to be the 262. I think your best bet is to reserve this piece for the jewelry slots, if possible. That means my selection of the legendaries will be sort of limited to the feats, the belt, the cloak, and the bracer slots, as well as the jewelry slots that I end up not using. Once that's filled out, the remaining slots will be made of crafted gear with the perks of my choosing, probably the erratic Genesis matrix for the free damage. For the mail and cloth wearers, we're looking at a somewhat similar format. For cloth wearers, the chest slot is reserved for Cypher Gear, and for mail wearers, it's the shoulder slot. Then we just sort of adjust it a bit. Of course, we can change things up however we like, based on our playstyle. Some of us do run occasional group content, where Cypher Gear presumably has no use. And for those who are interested in slamming the new Jailer's Gauntlet, then Domination Gear and Sockets come into play, and I'm not even gonna cover that here. I gotta say, as I made this video, I thought to myself, man, I am explaining a lot for like what's essentially, get your tier set bonus, don't let it conflict with your 2 legendaries, use a 262 crafted neck or ring, and finally fill out the rest with gear from Zereth Mortis and crafted gear, whichever gives the best performance. But gearing is a bit of a process, and 9.2 is no exception. There will be random powerful drops, there will be weekly events, there are going to be things that you get from rares and chests and the world boss. And it feels good to get that sense of completion, like you've collected all the things you want and you feel powerful. I didn't even cover the extra stuff to improve your experience, like the Cypher of the first ones, your little companion persons, stacking some of these power-ups, and more. Today, it's just gear. Personally, I'm finding 9.2 pretty interesting with the numerous offerings to choose from that aren't simply about item level, although, that's obviously important too. I hope I explained this well enough with the information that we have, but keep in mind that whether we're gearing up for raids, PvP, or outdoor zones, gearing up is a step-by-step process. I just wanted to have some fun nerding over the options because previous patches have felt pretty boring. Anyway though, that's enough from me. It's your turn. How much did I overwhelm you? Or is this boring? Or is it not boring enough? Share your thoughts in a comment below. Hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I will see you later. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.